Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. In this video we're going to cover prefabs, but you probably already knew that. Anyway, now let's see what actually prefabs are. In this case I won't be using our human that I created way back, but now I'm just going to be using a simple square. Now let's move that in our hierarchy, just like that. It's going to be centralized, nice and smooth, but let's move it somewhere. Now let's drag this square to our assets, to our project here. Now let's create another folder which we'll just call prefabs. That will store all of our prefabs. Nope, that's not the prefab, that's the prefab, that's square. Now before I start covering whatever the prefabs are, let's just look at example. Let's say this is not a prefab here, so let's delete that. And then I go to assets. This is a normal sprite. That's not a prefab. Now let's move that, and let's say I wanted to have really huge amounts of blocks on my scene, right? So now I had to, for example, change the copy that. You know, I'm doing this by pressing Ctrl and D, by the way. Now let's say, okay, I've got that. That was pretty easy, right? Well, okay. What if I wanted to, let's say, what if I changed this block specifically to be equal to 3 in terms of rotation, right? And then I had to change all of these blocks to this particular rotation, and you know, that's a bit of a pain. And if I changed, for example, the scale, and then I had to change the scale for all of these objects, you know, for example, I'm not selecting all of them sometimes, you know, if I, for example, press D, some of them won't have updated or something like that. You know, there are a couple of errors with that. And what prefabs allow us to do is avoid this. For example, when I just change one prefab, or sorry, one instance of a prefab, all of other instances of that prefab will automatically change, and I'll show you how to do that. And also, what another cool thing about prefabs is you can have this prefab and move it to another scene, right? So let's say I created another, let's go to scenes, and then I create another, there we go, scene, which will be, let's say, level 2, and then I go to level 2, you have saved that, and then when I go to level 2, I can just go to prefabs, put our prefab there, and whatever our prefab was customized to, because here you can see that we can change whatever we want you know, we can change whatever we want about our square, or sorry, about our prefab, and you know, that's pretty cool. And again, if you didn't have prefabs, if you were using this method, meaning without prefabs, you would have to copy these, for example, then paste them to another scene. Probably it will work, probably it won't, I don't know, but you know, that's pain, that's just pain. And you know, with that in mind, let's now look at what prefabs are. Now I'm going to go to my prefab here, to my prefabs folder, go in there, and now let's create an instance of our prefab. Now when you just, for example, drag and drop this prefab, you just created an instance. So in my case here, I created 2 instances. You can also say that you instantiate them, but we'll cover instantiating later in another video. For now, we'll just focus on this is an instance, and this is, oops, don't change it for now. There we go. So now this is an instance, and this is an instance of our square prefab. Okay. Now let's create some more instances. There we go. Let's change them, change their position. There we go. Now let's say I wanted to change the color of all of them, right? Now I go to square, where it is as a prefab, not an instance, and then I go to the color, and then let's say I want to make them red. You see that all of them change, including the thumbnail of our prefab. Now, okay, that's cool, right? Well, what if you wanted one of them, for example, to be different from the others, right? Which is perfectly normal. Well, let's say I get this prefab here, this instance of the prefab, and I change this to black. You see that, oops, you see that it doesn't update all of the colors of all other instances. However, you can also change them if you want to. So, you know, let's say, oh, okay, that looks pretty cool. Now, let me update all of my other instances so they look cool. They look as cool, right? So then what you do is you see that there is this overrides here, this tab here, and then click on apply all. And you see that everything changes, all instances, including the prefab, right? And so, okay, so now let's change, for example, the color of this object back to red. And then you see that the color field is bold. And why is it bold? It is bold because this prefab instance differs from the others, or more importantly, it differs from the prefab, the main prefab. And you know, as you can see here, none of these instances color is bold because they don't differ from the prefab. You know, as soon as I change this, for example, to white, you see, if I click away, you see that it's bold. You know, so this is a good indicator of whether a field of your instances differs from the original prefab. And one key thing that to keep in mind is that, for example, if you see the position and the rotation, they are both, and the reason is because well, you know, position and rotation, you would want them, every single instance, to have a different position. So you need to just kind of ignore that. So you know, when I click on you know, let's change the color of this, and then I click on apply all, even though the position and the rotation differ, it won't apply the changes to the other instances, including the prefab. Now, if you saw, what happened here is, when I change this to the color to red, let's change it again to something else, like let's say green, and then I apply it to all, you see that this is not changing, neither is this. And why is that? Because they are differing from the prefab. And now if I apply to all, you see that these have changed because they were the same as the prefab. However, this is not the same as the prefab in terms of color because it is bold, right? So now, oops, they just make it something else. So we update everything. There we go. Now we updated everything because none of these differed from the prefab. They had the same color, and it was on both. Now, that's pretty much it. There's one more thing actually. In the hierarchy, you see that these instances of the prefab are blue. They are not black. So this basically means, this signifies that they are prefabs. And by the way, you can make every single object in your hierarchy a prefab, which is actually a good practice in most cases. So even if I wanted to make my canvas a prefab, I would just drag it there, and you see that it turns blue because we just made it a prefab. And because we have so many squares here, let's just create an empty object, which will just say squares, just so everything is nice and tidy. So let's move this there. There we go. So when we minimize that, it looks a bit cleaner. Yeah, so that's pretty much it about prefabs. We will be using them a lot because they're really important. As you can see, they save a lot of time. So yeah, again, think of prefabs as templates for your objects. Well, okay guys, thank you for watching, and see you on the next video.